Hey there, and welcome to a deep dive tailored just for you. Ever get this feeling like we're being subtly nudged by, everything online these days?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're going deep on algorithmic governmentality,
Okay.
exploring how big data analysis might already be shaping our lives, even without those old school laws and rules.
Yeah. It's not about governments literally using algorithms to, control us. It's much more, I don't know, woven into the fabric of our digital lives.
Right. Like we know those targeted ads are spooky accurate, but what's the bigger picture here?
Right.
That's where this article, Algorithmic Governmentality and Perspectives of Emancipation by Antoinette Rouvroy and Thomas Burns comes in.
Yeah. They argue that this isn't just about advertising.
Oh, yeah.
It's a new form of governance.
Okay.
And it's shifting away from the individual as the main focus. It's interesting.
Moving towards something a bit more abstract.
Okay, hold on, because that already has my brain buzzing a little bit. Abstract how?
Yeah.
Like, what's replacing the me in this equation?
It's less about me and more about the connections between data points.
Okay.
So the relationships themselves become the target of control.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, let's break this down before we get lost in the matrix here. The article mentions 3 stages of how this algorithmic governmentality thing actually works. First up, data harvesting, which honestly sounds a bit creepy.
Well, it's happening constantly, whether we're aware of it or not.
Right.
Think about it. Every time we're online, we're leaving a trail of data.
Yeah.
Every purchase, search, even those emoji reactions we give after a customer service call, we're practically walking data mines. It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
So it's not just those targeted ads. It's deeper.
Much deeper. And all that data leads us to stage 2, data mining and knowledge production.
Okay.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Sophisticated algorithms sift through this massive sea of data, looking for patterns and connections in our behavior.
Right.
Connections we might not even be aware of ourselves.
Yeah. It's like they're thinking for us almost, or thinking about us at least.
Hmm.
Okay. So unlike a scientist with a hypothesis, these algorithms are building knowledge directly from the data itself.
Right.
It makes you wonder, are there blind spots because they aren't starting with a question?
Exactly. If you're not questioning the underlying assumptions, you might miss crucial nuances.
Right.
That's one of the big questions this article raises. What does it mean for knowledge production to be driven solely by data?
That's a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got mountains of data, algorithms finding hidden patterns. What's next? Stage 3, action on behaviors.
This is where things get a little uncomfortable.
Oh.
Forget about direct control.
Right.
This is about subtly nudging us in certain directions by predicting our next move.
Okay.
Like those airline tickets that seem to increase in price the longer you wait to book.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's like they know I'm itching for that vacation and want to squeeze every penny out of me.
That's a perfect example. The article uses that very scenario, personalized pricing, based on your perceived willingness to pay.
So it's not just about selling me something. It's like the system is trying to, mold my behavior based on these predictions.
Exactly. It's shaping our actions, often without us even realizing it. But here's where it gets really mind-bending. The article argues that all this personalization, this focus on individual data, doesn't actually mean we're more individualistic.
Right.
In fact, it might mean the opposite.
Wait. How can all this focus on me mean I'm less of an individual?
Because it's not really about you anymore.
Okay.
It's about the relationships between data points, not individual people. Think of it this way. Every time you make a decision online, you're not just expressing a preference, you're contributing to a pattern, reinforcing connections between data points that exist independently of you. You become, in a sense, a statistical double, a collection of data points rather than a whole complex person.
Okay, now you're really freaking me out.
Yeah.
So if it's not about me anymore, who or what is being controlled in this system?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And that's what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, so last we left off, we were grappling with this idea that in the age of algorithmic governmentality, it's less about us as individuals and more about, the relationships between our data points. It's a bit of a mind bender.
It is, and it raises a really important question. If our individual actions are less about us and more about feeding this web of data relationships, then what is being controlled here?
Right. Because if it's not about shaping me as an individual, what's the target? What's the end game for these algorithms?
It's not so much an end game as it is an ongoing process of optimization. Remember those airline tickets? Let's say you did end up paying that higher price. In that moment, the algorithm isn't necessarily thinking, aha, I've successfully manipulated this person. Instead, it's more like this action confirms a pattern, strengthens the link between these specific data points.
So like my impulsive traveler who craves Italian food data cluster just became a bit more defined because I caved and bought those expensive tickets.
Exactly. And that data point then gets linked to countless others, your browsing history, purchase history, maybe even things like your social media activity. All of this contributes to this complex web of relationships that the algorithm can then use to predict and influence future behaviors.
And here's what I find a bit unnerving. The article talks about how this system doesn't really allow for rate, for failure. It feels like even when I make a choice the algorithm didn't predict, it's still somehow winning.
It's true. Every action, even those that deviate from the predicted pattern, get absorbed back into the system, making it smarter, more efficient. There's this constant feedback loop refining those predictions.
Like those targeted ads that follow you around even after you buy the thing. It's like, give it a rest, algorithm. I already bought the shoes.
Exactly. The system never stops learning, even from its so-called mistakes. And that's where things get really interesting, because it starts to challenge our traditional ideas about individual agency and free will. If these algorithms can accurately predict and influence our behavior based on these complex relationships, what does that say about our capacity to act autonomously?
Okay, so we're not just talking about buying shoes anymore. We're talking about bigger questions of free will and what it means to be human in a world increasingly shaped by these invisible forces.
Precisely. And that brings us to a concept the article touches on that I think is crucial here, the idea of becoming. It's not just about our actions, but who we are and who we're evolving into.
I'm intrigued. Let's dive into this idea of becoming next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've established that this whole algorithmic governmentality thing is about more than just targeted ads or even predicting our next purchase.
Right.
It gets into these big questions of free will and what it even means to be human in this digital age.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of becoming comes in.
Okay.
It's a concept that goes beyond just our actions. It's about our potential, our capacity for growth and change.
Which feels extra relevant now, right? If these algorithms are constantly analyzing our past choices to predict our future ones, does that limit what we can become?
It's a crucial question, and this article doesn't shy away from the philosophical side of things.
Yeah.
It brings in some big thinkers like Gilbert Simondon,
Okay.
who believe that relationships are fundamental to how we become individuals.
Makes sense, right? We learn and evolve through our interactions with the world, with other people, with ideas.
Right?
We're constantly shaped by those connections.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Simondon also argued that this becoming requires friction, a clash of scales and realities, as he called it.
Okay.
It's about encountering the unexpected, the unknown, the things that challenge our assumptions and push us to grow. It's like the difference between reading a book someone recommends because they know you'll agree with it and stumbling across one you'd never normally pick up and having your whole perspective shifted.
Okay, I can see how that kind of intellectual clash is important for growth. But how does that play out in a world increasingly dominated by algorithms that seem determined to predict and even prevent those clashes?
That's where another concept comes into play. Some philosophers describe the digital networks we're talking about as a kind of rhizome.
Rhizome, like a plant.
Exactly. Think of a network of roots growing horizontally, sending out shoots in all directions, constantly expanding, evolving. It's decentralized, interconnected, always changing.
Which on the surface sounds a lot like the internet, right? Constantly growing, connecting seemingly unrelated ideas and information.
Exactly. But here's where the article takes a really interesting turn. It suggests that while these digital systems might look like rhizomes, they actually function in a way that stifles genuine becoming.
Hold on, so these algorithms are mimicking a rhizome, but not really? How does that work?
Think about it this way. A true rhizome thrives on unpredictable growth.
Right.
It goes in unexpected directions. But these algorithms, by constantly predicting and preemptively addressing our needs and desires, end up smoothing out those rough edges, creating a closed loop.
Okay.
Everything becomes predictable, even our own desires. It's like instead of discovering new paths, we're just stuck on the same well-worn track. We're left with the kind of managed spontaneity, where even our desire to break free from the algorithm is anticipated and fed back to us in the form of more personalized content.
So rather than expanding our horizons, this digital rhizome might actually be boxing us in, limiting our potential for genuine growth and change.
Precisely. And it's not some evil genius pulling the strings, right?
Right.
It's the very nature of these systems, designed to predict and optimize, often at the expense of the unexpected and the unknown, the very elements that are crucial for our becoming.
Wow. Okay, so where does that leave us? Trapped in a digital echo chamber of our own predictable desires. It's a pretty bleak outlook.
It doesn't have to be. I think the first step is awareness. By understanding how these systems work, how they shape our perceptions and choices, we can start to reclaim some of that agency. It's about being mindful of the content we consume, the choices we make online, and seeking out those opportunities for genuine surprise and disruption.
I love that. It's not about rejecting technology altogether. It's about having a more conscious, critical relationship with it, about actively seeking out those experiences that challenge our assumptions and push us outside our comfort zones, both online and offline.
Absolutely, because those are the experiences that truly allow us to grow and become.
This has been such a thought-provoking deep dive. If this digital rhizome is already here to stay, how can we use our understanding of it to foster the kind of individual and collective becoming that leads to a more free and meaningful existence? Something for all of us to think about as we navigate this increasingly complex digital landscape. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the ideas shaping our world.